A quick thank you to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Cat Crab Lobster, DuckMachine, Try Again 95, Astraya the Dreamer, Mezec, Feudic Jarl, Germanchemist, Casper Arnholtz, and Chaos to Must. Thank you very much. I'm Sorry, written by TerranEclipse. Eric sat on a bar stool on board a colossal Kvik space station called Star's Solace as she waited in the crowded bar full of aliens from all different species for her friend to come back from a bodily function room, or bathroom, as the humans call them. Speaking of humans, she saw her human friend, Nick, emerge from the bathroom and make his way over to her. The absolute giant of a creature, big even for the already massive humans, crossed the room between them in a few short steps. Eric counted herself lucky that she made friends with a giant human. After all, having someone the size of an escape pod essentially being your guardian and best friend meant that not many creatures who would have otherwise hurt her would even come near her. For the most part. "Thanks for waiting for me. I thought you might have headed back to the ship," Nick said in his admittedly strange accent. He was from a place called Scotland, Eric recalled in her head as he sat down on his human-sized bar stool. The chiefly made chair creaked and groaned under his weight as he sat next to her. Eric looked down at her half-drank glass of traditional Kvik Wagner juice in her talons as she turned her head to look at Nick. "There is a group of Nisviak outside. I think they're waiting for me to come out," she said, a bit worried that the thought of ending back up in the hands of the Nisviak slavers. "Of course there are," Eric thought darkly in her head as she downed the last of her drink. A small, fragile Evkerkian such as herself would make a perfect target for Nisviak slaves. Then her unique grey and blue feathers would fetch a fair profit. It was even worse given the fact that nearly every species in the galaxy, bar humans, wouldn't do anything about it, saying it wasn't their place to disrupt their culture. The Nisviak were a nasty bunch, who stole who they could and sold them off for a profit to the darkest corners of the galaxy, to work for cruel beings in mines or factories in horrendous conditions. If they were lucky. She, and every other being in the galaxy, has heard the stories of the traditional Nisviak feasts. Her grey and blue feathers shook even thinking about it. Nick downed the last of his alcoholic drink in hand. Humans were the only creature in the known galaxy who could drink alcohol without their insides turning to goop or being poisoned by the nasty chemicals of the drink. Eric had tried a tiny sip of alcohol once and ended up being rushed by Nick to the closest medical center for heavy doses of anti-poison and other drugs. "Well, you're ready to go, hen," Nick said as he tapped the chest twice with a quick succession and matte black heavy armored weapons suit materialized over his body. Only his head remained uncovered as the suit's helmet was clamped on his back and he stood up and crouched forward to avoid hitting his head on the ceiling. "Yeah." Eric stood up and also was quickly reminded of the size difference between themselves, and she only reached up halfway to Nick's thigh. She too tapped her chest, and a much like lighter suit of armor of light grey-purple color covered her body and wings. "Right then, I'll pay for the drinks. Now you can transfer me your share once we get to the ship," Nick said before turning towards the bar to pay the hefty amount the two had drank. "Fine by me. I'll transfer my share once we get to the ship," Eric said. The two made their way to the bar's exit, with Eric walking out the door before its automated blast shielding slammed shut and locked Nick inside. "What the hell?" Eric heard Nick's muffled yells as he banged his fist on the door. "Nick, you all right? What happened?" she asked back as Nick's pounding subsided. "The effing door closed in my face, that's what happened," Nick yelled back through a thick reinforcement as he turned to face the bartender. Eriac's helmet materialized over her head and beak as she looked around, and her two avian eyes landed on a large group on Nisviak standing a few meters away from her. As she looked over them, they all turned their heads to stare directly at her. "Ah, fuck," she muttered under her breath. Almost immediately, the group of 7 or so Nisviak turned their insect-like heads to look at each other, and then they nodded and clicked in approval. A short and stocky Nisviak motioned towards her, and they advanced. They towered over her as they began to approach her. Stick-like appendages stuck from their bodies as 2 of them pulled stun guns and restraints from their belts and bags that they wore. They let off a series of clicks, which her translator picked up as,
"Come here, little feather ball, and maybe we'll go easy on you."
One of the idiot's talons handed curled around the grip of her lace gun, and she began to back up towards the bar door, only to bump into something hard, and she spun around to see even more Enzviek had appeared from around the corner.
"Damn it,"
she thought in her head as she was completely surrounded by the insect-like creatures, each clicking in precise ways of excitement so fast her translator couldn't keep up. However, a few words did come through, and she couldn't imagine
"I'm gonna have fun with her"
could mean anything good. Nick, better hurry up with that blasted door. Don't think I'm going to be able to do much by myself, she thought. The largest Enzviek tried to grab her, but she dodged out of the way and shot the insect twice in his chest, the small lasgun burning through the chitin on the first shot, and the second impacting the melting of the soft insides of the Enzviek. Nick's arguing with the bartender was interrupted as his head snapped to the sound of lasgun fire from outside. Or to be more specific, the lasgun that he had specifically made for Eric. "Oh shit, Harry!" Nick turned and bashed the door a few times, but it wouldn't budge as he turned to face the bartender whilst foaming at the mouth. "Open this damn door right now, or else I'll rip those crab-looking arms off of you and fick you with them." The Kasviak bartender sighed as he turned his eye stalks upwards to face the giant human.
"Look, human,"
he said in a malice dripping from his voice,
"those doors aren't going to open anytime soon. And besides, listen to all the gunfire outside. It's much safer in here."
Nick was tempted to melt the door and the barman with the anti-tank cannon fixed to his shoulder before he heard a scream of pain from outside. "Hurry!" The Enzviek pounced on her as she fired a few more shots from her pistol, uselessly, until both it and the talons holding it were ripped from her hand. She cried in pain as the fire spread through her body, blue blood dripping from her now talonless fingers. They ripped her armor off along with the bodysuit underneath it as they began brutally to beat her frail, feathered body. Eric started to cry as Enzviek used their long, thin arms as whips and clubs to beat her. The beatings finally stopped as one of the insects wrapped 2 of its 6 arms around her neck and lifted her off the ground.
We're going to just sell you off to whoever paid the most. But no, I think I and all my crew can use a small bit of fun and a meal to the next station or planet we find."
It clicked out as Eric's broken talons weakly scratched the chitin-covered appendages. The rest of the Enzviek laughed at her as they hurled insults. She started shaking in fear, as all she could do was pray to the ancient gods that Nick would save her.
"And we bribed the barman so that he would keep the blast shutters down long enough to get you on our ship. That human is not coming to help you."
Nick roared with adrenaline-filled rage as he smashed his plated fists against the barricade as several large dents started to appear in the door. The barman stood behind him with a look of worry now present all over his face.
"Look, human, take it easy, alright."
The Crisp bartender was shut up by a table being ripped from the ground and thrown at him, followed by a black armored fist grabbing his eye stalks.
"Open the damned door, or I will kill you and do it myself," the human said in a low, menacing voice. The door, is automated to stay closed. It's not going to open," the barman said as green blood dripped from several cuts in his face before he was launched into the dented door and turned into splat.
"Not good enough," Nick growled as his helmet slid over his face before giving the door one final rage-fueled kick. The Enzviek were cut off by several loud bangs coming from the bar, and dents began to bulge outwards of the bar's barricaded door before the door was sent off its hinges into the floor. And the sight that followed will stay with Eric for the rest of her days. Quickly, 2 of the Enzviek had holes the size of her head blown through their bodies as Nick emerged from the bar, his armor covered in the barman's green blood as he charged into the group of Enzviek and started tearing them apart. Nick towered over the Enzviek as the shortest of them came to his groin and the tallest came up to just under where his stomach would be, as he grabbed the Enzviek holding her and crushed its skull in his hand, and without making a sound turned to deal with the rest of them. The other Enzviek jumped at Nick, stabbing at him with plasma knives and beating him with clubs,
but none of the attacks pierced his armor, as Nick jumped onto the back and crushed 2 Ensviak stabbing at him under his immense weight, before rolling back onto his knees and smashing his head through the chitinous body of the closest Ensviak. The remaining crew of the insects turned tail and ran away, but one stayed and pulled a gun from his belt and pointed it at Eric's feathered head.
Step back, you demon, or I will kill her.
The rather small Ensviak yelled as he pointed the gun at Nick, who was now covered in a thick layer of blood and gore. Nick said nothing, and stood to his full height as he pulled a large slug thrower from which was magnetically locked to his leg and blew a hole through the skull of the insect before it could even react. Nick locked the pistol back on his leg and scooped up the small form of Eric in his arms as he cradled her to his chest. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I couldn't get here sooner. The barman wouldn't open the door." Nick was cut off, but Eric pressed a hand to his helmet, where his lips would be. It's okay. They paid the barman to keep the door shut." Eric choked out, her eyes so blurry with tears that she could barely make out the helmet's glowing blue eyes. The final thing Eric saw was Nick's helmet as darkness took her. Nick stood over Eric's body as she laid unconscious in their ship's medbay. He had cleaned his armor of blood and gore and now stood in a skin-tight bodysuit as he looked down on her solemnly. He had initially rushed her to the ship in a mad dash to have her medical facilities heal her, but her injuries were too great and she almost died in his arms if a kind passerby didn't lend him his transport after some very detailed words about the Kivik's family. Still, he placed her on the ship's medical table, and the nanobots and AI reconstructed her body to the best of their effort. Right now, his medical AI told him the best thing it could do was put her in a coma and hope that she would wake up from it. He dropped to his knees, and he rested his pale hand on her dark grey talons. She looked so peaceful as she laid motionless on the table. Nick said in a broken voice, "I'm so sorry." End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed